This is The Devil's Guide to D&D. Devil's Delegate here, trying to speak through a cold that screwed up my plans for the past 2 weeks. But I wanted to comment on something Wizards of the Coast just did. There's a big change for a coming book, and perhaps a bigger change for all of D&D come 2024 when we get an updated version of the Player's Handbook. The new release is an Unearthed Arcana, The Heroes of Krynn Revisited, which is a radical update of their previous UA, The Heroes of Krynn, which contained the blueprint for the upcoming Dragonlance campaign book. Now, I had some issues with The Heroes of Krynn, which you can find in my video here. Or in my video here. It was a two-parter. And it feels like WotC watched my videos and changed things so that I'd personally be happy. They answered just about all my complaints. Before getting to the real meat, let me touch on 2 other items. Firstly, the Lunar Sorcerer is not in the revised UA. That's because they got positive feedback, so it's moving along in development and will be in the campaign book. The other item is the Kender. People really didn't like the kleptomania being turned into a magical power, and I didn't like it because it wasn't a very good magical power. The lore, which is all flavor so you can ignore it, has changed from them being filled with magic to them being an offshoot of gnomes. Yeah, Kender are gnomes now. Defined by their bravery. All 3 other features have changed. Brave, which was the halfling feature giving advantage on fear saves, is now fearless, granting immunity to fear. That's a sweet little buff. Though less impactful than I've heard others claim, you only make a limited number of fear saves throughout the lifetime of a character, and with a decent wisdom, advantage would make most of those a success. So the number of times being immune will change things is quite small for most campaigns. Still, it's nice and will be handy when planning how to deal with a dragon. The most noticeable change is that Kender Ace, the potentially amusing but utterly useless ability to pull random things out of a pocket, is gone. I'd have preferred them to fix it, making the items that Kender could grab be either useful or funnier, but replacing it altogether does answer my criticism. Instead, the Kender gets a skill proficiency. Kind of boring, but infinitely more helpful. Taunt has changed in 2 ways. I noted that before it depended on the charisma of the Kender, which is not how features have worked recently, and I predicted it would change to be charisma or intelligence or wisdom, your choice. And that's exactly what they did. The other change is that before on a failed save, the target would have disadvantage on its attack rolls, where now it has disadvantage on its attack rolls against anyone except the Kender. This is much weaker, requiring the Kender be either a tank who's okay with the enemy focus, or will require some clever placement in battle. It is, however, now a taunt. Before it was a general debuff. Overall, I'd say this is a slight improvement for the race, though I'm still not excited about it. Okay, now let's get to the big news, which is about feats, and the backgrounds that supplied them. The original Heroes of Krynn had 2 backgrounds supplying feats, thus creating a massive inequality. Anyone taking those backgrounds would be significantly better off than anyone with a normal background. I also noted that those 2 feats were poorly designed, the one for knights granting armor proficiency that martial classes already provide. And the other new feats, while passable, were almost always a poor choice compared to other available feats or an ASI. Well, WotC listened and changed things in a way that suggests how the future of the game might be. For now, these changes are intended only for the Dragonlance setting, and Jeremy Crawford emphasized that it's because the War of the Lance is particularly intense. We'll see how long that train of thought continues. For now, all the War of the Lance characters get a feat at first level. The feat can be either skilled, tough, or one of the 3 new ones, Divinely Favored, Initiate of High Sorcery, or Squire of Solamnia. The last 2 being automatic choices if the character took the Mage of High Sorcery or Knight of Solamnia backgrounds. Note that those 2 backgrounds are pretty much the same from the previous version. The only change was Knight of Solamnia switched to supplying 2 languages instead of a language and a musical instrument. Now that everyone gets a feat, they're just backgrounds, nothing special. They give a couple skills and free lodging. They're fine. The 5 possible free feats follow a theme. 1 for knights, 1 for arcane spellcasters, 1 for divine spellcasters, 1 for non-knight melee characters, and 1 for support classes. Of course, those 5 areas overlap and you don't have to follow the themes. Tough could be a knife's buff for a fragile wizard, and a barbarian taking skilled could find himself with something to do out of combat. So everyone getting a feat negates my inequality criticism, but there's more. At 4th level, characters gain yet another free feat. This is separate from the normal ASI, so you could take 2 feats at 4th level. The choices here are any of the 1st level feats you didn't already take, or Alert, Mobile, Sentinel, Warcaster, or one of the 3 new Adept of the Robes feats meant for mages, or one of the 3 Knights feats meant for, well, knights. Note, some of the feats have prerequisites, and we'll get to that. Okay, so forget anything I said in my last video comparing the new feats to some old ones, because that's no longer an issue. These are free. They've also been changed. We've been given several indicators that when the entire game is revamped in 2024, that characters will get a feat at 1st level. This now looks like they're sending out feelers to see how players will feel about an additional feat at 4th. Now, I'm sure there'll be some complaints about power creep and OP, but I like it. As is, there are a lot of builds that don't come online until 6th, 10th, or higher levels. If you can pick up feats earlier, those character concepts will work much earlier, so be more fun. Of the 4th level offerings here, the older feats are all solid, if a bit boring, which is for the best since they're more likely to be useful to more characters. Alert is great for buffers and controllers and anyone who hits hardest if they hit first. Mobile is a plus for monks, rogues, and rangers. Sentinel is a must for tanks, and Warcaster has become nearly required for many casters. So good stuff. So what about the new feats? I'm going to start with Divinely Favored, a feat I called pointless the first time around because it wasn't gained for free at first level. So that criticism is covered. Notice that Divine Communication, that had a prerequisite of this feat, is nowhere to be seen, which takes care of another of my criticisms as it wasn't any good. The old Divinely Favored started off by giving you Thaumaturgy. The new one lets you choose from any cleric cantrip. Yep, that was another of my criticisms handled. And already the feat is good, fantastic for free at first level. Obviously Guidance is the choice, but many of the options are good. Hey, you're unhappy your bard doesn't have a more damaging cantrip? Well, now he starts with Toll the Dead. The feat continues as before, giving you your choice of a first level spell based on alignment that you can cast once as well as with any spell slots that you have, using Int, Wiz, or Charisma, your choice. But the new one adds a second spell. You get Augury. Not my favorite spell, as mentioned when it was part of the Divine Communication feat, but for free as an extra to this feat, yeah. The new version has limited your spell choices. You now get a Warlock spell if evil, a Cleric if good, and a Druid if neutral, while before you could choose those, or anyone could choose a Wizard spell. No Wizard rules out my top choice of Find Familiar or Shield, but Warlock gives Hex, Cleric gives Bless or Healing Word, and Druid gives Goodberry. So, solid choices. This is a decent feat and great for free at first level. Note, I would not take it for a Cleric or Druid, but for a Warlock or anyone else, even a non-caster, this is good. Moving on to our nightly feats, my problem with the Squire of Solamnia feat before was that it was a design mess, intended for armored warriors, but sucking for them. Well, they fixed that. The improvements start with copy editing. The original, on the left, had a prereq of Squireship of the Knights of Solamnia, which isn't a defined thing in the game. It now says either the Knights of Solamnia background or the Fighter or Paladin class. Hey, those are defined and make sense. For the rest, the old is just dumped. Now it supplies a speed boost to mounting a steed, but the big deal is one of 3 combat maneuvers, along with superiority dice, and the 3 follow-up feats will continue this thread. For those of you who don't dwell in the D&D community, it's been a conversation for a long time that the fighter is a good class, but a boring one, and that the features of the Battlemaster should have just been given to the base fighter class. WotC seems to have listened and is trying that out, letting you play a different subclass and still getting a bit of the Battlemaster complexity. You get to choose one of 3 maneuvers. The best choice here is precision attack, but lunging can be okay, and pushing attack is good in combats where the environment plays a big part, and you get to swap the one you choose out after a long rest. Your superiority dice are d6s, and you get proficiency bonus number of them, which is nice as it increases over time. I like all this. But now things get a little complicated. These dice can only be used with the maneuvers from this feat, so if you took the Battlemaster subclass, the pools of dice do not merge. Even though since you've learned the maneuver, nothing says you can't use it with superiority dice from a different source. And these dice renew after a long rest instead of a short rest. Now that's okay, but unless they plan to retire the subclass in 2024, which is possible, I say needlessly confusing. Why call them superiority dice if they aren't the same? Why not just say you can do the maneuver proficiency times per day? This pokes at my game design sense in an uncomfortable way, but it's a decent feat, and melee warriors should be happy to have it. The 3 follow-up feats, Knight of the Crown, Rose, and Sword, have likewise been radically changed. All are now half feats that supply 1 additional maneuver from a choice of 2, and 2 more superiority dice, which are d8s, and they changed the d6s from the previous feat to d8s. Again, these are all good feats, and great for free, particularly as they are half feats, which really helps in getting a primary stat to 20 quick. Knights of the Crown is a half feat for strength and dex, so good for any melee warrior, and offers distracting strike or goading attack. Not my favorite maneuvers, but they're okay. Goading is the better one, at least for a tank. I wouldn't say that this was better than the original version of this feat, but then that one wasn't free, and I do like the consistency. Knight of the Rose is a half feat for Con and Charisma, so Paladins. Its maneuvers are Commander's Strike and Rally. Again, not top tier maneuvers, though Commander's Strike can be very good in the right kind of party, mainly one with a rogue who can use a sneak attack on off turns thanks to this. The old version lets you give out some temp hit points. Rally does that too, though not as many and to not as many allies. But I think the versatility makes the new Rose better, and in any case it's free and I like the consistency. Knight of the Sword is a half feat for Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. An odd grouping, but again, fitting for Paladin. The maneuvers are Maneuvering Attack, again not a favorite, and Menacing Attack, which is one of the top combat maneuvers. So for a Paladin, this is where I'd go. The old version of Swords was the odd man out. It wasn't a half feat, but instead gave proficiency to the saving throws of one of the 3 abilities. It also allowed you to boost an ally's saves, making the old version better, but not better for who they intended it for. Paladins already have charisma saves, and those aren't high choices for a fighter. For game balance and theme, it's best that they changed it. As a way of making fighters more interesting, I like these feats. Paladins don't really need to be more interesting, but still, I like the direction WotC's going. And they really have answered my criticism about the Knight's feats being better for a caster. So what about the Mage feats? They've been changed too, though not so completely. Initiate of High Sorcery has enjoyed the same editing cleanup, now having a prereq of either the High Sorcery background or being a sorcerer or wizard, instead of the non-existent Apprentice of High Sorcery. You still choose a moon, which affects what spells you can choose, and then you get a cantrip and a first level spell that you can cast once, as well as with spell slots using whatever mental ability you wish. First big change is you can choose any wizard cantrip instead of from the 3 cantrips that were offered based on the moon you chose. This greatly raises your options, though it takes Vicious Mockery and Guidance off the table, so it's debatable if that's a win. The second big change is that now you get 2 first level spells instead of 1. Those spells are now chosen from 4 options, based on your moon choice, instead of 2 schools. For Nutari, Distant Whispers is a good spell, and Hex is good for some builds. You rapidly outgrow Ray of Sickness. Lunatari is weaker, but Disguise Self is useful at any level, and Featherfall is nice to have when you need it. Color Spray is not worth the time by 3rd level, so not a good choice. But everyone will go with Solinari and Shield. Comprehend Languages, Detect Evil and Good, and Protection from Evil and Good are too situational to be great choices, but they'll do. Optimization-wise, I can't call this an improvement, but I do like the feel of it more. And for free? Sure. Though not for a wizard. Better for a sorcerer who needs the known spells, or bard or warlock, or a paladin who'd love shield. The 3 Adept of the Colored Robes don't have the same consistency as the 3 nightly follow-up feats, and have been altered less. They all give a 2nd level spell from a choice of 2 schools, and then some other feature. Kinda wish they had just gone with 2 spells. Black Robes, those are the evil casters, offer a spell from enchantment or necromancy. The old version had evocation instead of enchantment. This loses the option for spiritual weapon, which was the pick before. Necromancy offers little. And it's also a strange thematic switch since the Black Robe guys are the blasters, though honestly, any other 2nd level evocation damage spells wouldn't be worth having a few levels further on. Enchantment offers Suggestion, which is a winner, and a few others that would be okay. The feature is Life Channel, where you get to spend hit dice to do a little extra damage on a damaging spell. It's okay, and they have improved it, both in the damage it does and it not being ridiculously non-intuitive. In both versions, you can spend hit dice up to the level of the spell, but in the old one, you then halved that, rounded up, and rolled that for damage. They got rid of the halving, so that's good. For free, this is good, but if I'm a mage, I'm going to see if maybe I can be a little less evil and join one of the other colored orders. The Adept of the Red Robes are for the neutral mages. They get a 2nd level spell from Illusion or Transmutation, changed from Divination and Transmutation. That's a step up, with Invisibility, Minor Image, and a few others. The feature is Magical Balance, that lets you take a 10 when you roll a 9 or below on attack rolls or ability checks, and this is a big nerf. As before, it included saves, and saves were what mattered. I mean, a 9 on an attack roll really is not going to matter to most casters except warlocks, and they can just shoot again. So now it's really just for ability checks. If I was paying for this feat, I'd be unhappy with that change. But I'm not. It's free. And the help on ability checks can be really nice, mainly for wizards. Wizards are not good at skills, so can be beaten with arcana checks by just about anyone who wants to, particularly bards and rogues. But even sorcerers can buff their skill checks. So this would make a wizard decent with arcana. Also, initiative is an ability check. So yeah, I'd still go with this over the Black Robes and be happy to have it. The Adept of the White Robes is for the good guys. They get a 2nd level spell from Abjuration or Divination, with Divination swapped from the original Conjuration. So out goes Misty Step and Vortex Warp, and in comes Fortune's Favor. Though Aid and Pass Without Trace are still good choices. The feature is Protective Ward, which is mostly the same. As a reaction, spend a spell slot, roll some dice, and reduce some damage to someone hit within 30 feet. The change is the dice are now D6s instead of D4s. That's an improvement, but doesn't answer my problems with this feature, namely that it scales horribly, and that it's only good if you know you're reducing enough damage to keep an ally up. The whole reason why you use Healing Word. In a game where everyone freely talks about how many hit points they have left, this is good. In ones where they don't, this isn't good. I prefer features that are more consistent between games. For free, yes, this is good. But between the 3, I'd take the Red Robes. Though as an arcane caster at 4th, I'd take Divinely Favored, or a Warcaster. But as a free feat, all of these are good. And that's really the big takeaway here. Since they've fixed up their design problems, all these feats are okay, but the big move is that we can now now take feats at first level and 4th level. And if this is the future of the game, I'm for it. That's it for now. I'm gonna go take some cold medicine. Feel free to join me.